So our next session titled Sikhism Globally. And for this, I would like to invite on stage as speaker Mr. Manjeev Singh Puri, who is in conversation with Mr. Vertul Singh. Can we have a huge round of applause, please? Manjeev Singh Puri, he is a former Indian diplomat who has served as ambassador of India to the European Union, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Nepal. He was also ambassador, deputy permanent representative of India to the UN in New York. In addition, he has served in Germany, Cape Town, Muscat, Bangkok, and Caracas. During his long diplomatic career, Ambassador Puri developed special expertise on multilateralism and the United Nations, plus global issues such as climate change and sustainable development. He was also an instrumental person in the publication of the book Sikh Heritage of Nepal, which came out in the year 2019, and presently he is a distinguished fellow at the Energy and Resource Institute. Now, talking about our discussant, Mr. Vertul Singh, he holds a postgraduate diploma in journalism and mass communication, currently posted in a senior position with the Government of India, and he published works including Bhopal Nama, Ek Guna, Bekhudi, and several others to his accolades, and he has published in the prestigious anthologies. He also has over 200 articles and book reviews to his credit and has written popular weekly columns for the Bangalore Mirror and the DB Post. He is currently working on the Compendium of Hindi Literature of the 20th Century. I now hand over the stage to the two gentlemen, please.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Puri. Good afternoon, audience. We will start our discussion. Firstly, I would be requesting Ambassador Puri to focus on Sikhism in general. Thereafter, we will talk about Sikhism globally, which happens to be the main topic of our session. And lastly, we will talk about his acclaimed book, which Ambassador Puri has written, the Sikh Heritage of Nepal. It was unveiled by no less a person than the then Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh ji. And Ambassador Puri has elaborated in detail about Sikhs, particularly in Nepal, how that institution flourished. So, Ambassador, to begin with, let me quote our late Khushwant Singh, who has mentioned in his book, The Sikhs, and I will just go through it, that Sikhs were the most outstanding example of Hindu Renaissance produced by Islam. And this is interesting. He also goes on to draw an analogy of, he says that an edifice built as it were with Hindu bricks and Islamic mortar. Your comments on this, Ambassador Puri.
Vertul, thank you very much. You know, this is my third time on the stage here, so please don't mind it. Let me say something to you which is a little different. You know, I'm a civil servant, a diplomat, and most of us spend our life doing what the government wants you to do. And you will agree, for those of you who have had anything to do with the state, that it's very rarely that you get an opportunity to do what you want to do and the state wants you to do it too. So let me tell you, at the end of 37 years in the Indian Foreign Service, don't ask me why, but the coincidences happened. So let me weave this story, because you guys should hear this story. And I'll try to answer your question a little later, Vertul, because it's a fantastic question. I mean,
please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So, the first Indian ambassador in Nepal in 1947 was a Sikh gentleman called Sardar Surjit Singh Majithia, grandfather of Harsimrat Kaur Badal, coming from an illustrious family in Punjab. Possibly the need was to accommodate this gentleman because he was politically important. 70 years later, and you can understand why, there had only been ambassadors of one persuasion. 70 years later, the government of India decided that another gentleman who wears a turban shall be sent to Nepal, and that was yours truly in 2017. Now, you asked me some question about what edifice and what, etc. I have my views on it. Everybody has his views. Khushwant Singh ji said that Sikhism is a religion on Hindu bricks and an Islamic edifice. I am sorry, but I belong to a slightly different understanding. This is the milieu in which Sikhism grew. I believe it is an original religion, and Guru Nanak is an original. You know, I am nobody to question Khushwant Singh. He is everything for all of us. But this is a viewpoint and that's a perspective. But coming back to my little story. The Indian embassy in Nepal, for good reasons, over the 70 years between Surjit Singh Majithia and myself, must have had 5 Sikh officers. The numbers, in any case, is limited in everything. I know you see a few very prominent ones of us on the television, etc. But can you imagine, once I reached there, there were 5 of us in the embassy at the same time. It is India's largest embassy. We have a huge military section and so on. But still 5 people at the same time, including a military doctor, a lady, an officer from the non-foreign service quota. I was the only foreign service officer. But we had 5. And then the government of India took this historic decision to mark and celebrate across the world in the biggest possible manner 550 years of the birth of Guru Nanak. Now again you can ask 550 years, why? 500 I can understand. 1000 one can understand. But whatever may be the reason, I look at it as a coming together of unbelievable coincidences for myself. And naturally, I mean, I could have done the standard things that everybody else did, copy, paste from here, there and talk about it. But we looked around and said, what is there in the country where we are stationed, Nepal, which has anything to do with Sikhism, Guru Nanak, etc., and what can we do? Now, one of the things that used to strike anyone who goes to Kathmandu or Birganj or any of the places, if any of you have been to, is that there is a fairly prominent Sikh community. One reason is we wear the turbans, you stand out. The other thing is the trucking business. For those of you who have worked in the eastern part of India, you will understand that trucking, busing, even today, taxis, that's the most easy way of identifying Sikhs. Well, they took Nepal to be an extension. That's how things happened. And so they were dominant. Numbers now is very few, you know, globalization, many things. People's kids want to be in Australia and the United States and so on. No great difference. And we looked at this and said, wow, how come this religion, predominantly from the northwest of India, in the area around Punjab, Delhi, etc., how does it have a footprint in Nepal? And then we discovered some very fascinating things. Now, the first one that I'm going to say to you, I have no evidence and I myself am very skeptical. The idea that Guru Nanak traversed through what is today Nepal in one of his udasis, it is crystal clear and established that he went to Tibet. It is also crystal clear that he went to Banaras and he went to the eastern part of India. Did he travel through something which is today Nepal? I don't know the answers. But there's a shrine in Kathmandu who claim that they have some linkage with that. I am not in a position to verify or anything, but note it. Now comes the more fascinating. And Vertul, allow me to speak for a few minutes. Thank you. Most of us do not recognize that the Sikh Gorkha Connect possibly had a defining impact on the governance of India for 197 years. And I'm talking about the colonial rule. The Marathas, the place where you come from, Gwalior, Indore, had there been a cooperation between the three, I don't know which way the British Empire would have gone. But all 3 of them chose to be with the British. You know, it's history. We don't have to get into whether it was right, wrong, etc. That's what happened. And now let me tell you this. The Nepalese consolidated, there were small princely states in Nepal. They consolidated under a king called Prithvi Narayan Shah, and modern Nepal was born. This was at the same time that the East India Company started establishing its first major holds across India, the Bengal Presidency. And obviously there were clashes. But the Nepalese in their consolidation, and mark this, crossed the Teesta River and had Darjeeling under their charge. On the southern part, they reached to the borders of what we today call Bihar. They were stopped by the British, 1794, a very famous battle. But they went westward. And today, on the west side of Nepal, we have Uttarakhand, Kumaon and Garhwal divisions. If you go further, you have Himachal Pradesh. And if you go below the hills of Shimla, you reach Kangra. I don't know how many of you are aware. When they reached Kangra, the army of the Sikh, Manjeev Singh, who is also a contemporary of the same thing, they stopped them. Because they said we could not let them march any further. It would impact the Sikh empire and its interests. That is when the first Gorkha was recruited into an Indian army. Individually, there may have been some individuals, but the first institutional recruitment happened. The rest, as they say, is history. The British neutralized the Sikhs, then they turned towards the Nepalese, they fixed them. 1816, the Nepalese lost, and they figured out that this was the big Badshah, the British Empire. No need of having fights with them, become in collusion with them. But Maharaja Ranjit Singh's widow, Jindan Kaur, escaped the British and was given shelter in Nepal for some 15-20 years before that famous incident of going to meet her son, which resulted in her death, and so on and so forth. Complete change in the way history manifested. She came to Nepal with a small group of Sikhs.
There's a wonderful book on Jindan Kaur recently.
Absolutely.
The Last Princess.
The Last Princess, a colleague of mine, Navtej Sadhana, has written a lot about it, but that's a different kind of story. Jindan Kaur came to Nepal with a small group of Sikhs, as was usual in those days. Kings and queens were accompanied by retinues. The remnants of this lot who came, maybe a few hundred of them, when she left, they remained in Nepal, settled in the lower Terai areas bordering Uttar Pradesh today, near the areas what we call Bharaich district. These chaps have maintained for 200 years Sikh Gurdwaras. The men wear hair, they don't know what's going on. They don't, of course, speak Punjabi, etc. Now with modern communications, we've reached out to them. And they have maintained a kind of cocoon of Sikhism in Nepal over 200 years, unknown to us guys sitting from Punjab and Delhi. And the third wonderful iteration, as India became independent and Nepal took the first steps towards some kind of development, who would open the roads? Who would drive the trucks? Who would do anything? The same enterprising guys who moved from Punjab all the way to Calcutta saw an opportunity and became the first guys to drive the first trucks, the first buses, and indeed earned the trust of the Nepalese to the point, as it says anecdotally, in those days in the 60s and 70s when there were hardly any roads in Nepal, and it was a country of migration even then. They had to be because there's nothing else there. If women had to travel by bus, they looked to see whether there was a Sikh driving because they said Man Maryada would be respected. This is the kind of respect that they did. But today, it is a case of forgotten shrines, forgotten histories, and we perhaps don't even know that the implications stand forgotten.
Let me remind the audience here that what Ambassador Puri just mentioned, this is just a kind of a synopsis of what he has written in his book. I would request all of you to get hold of this book if you want to really know about the enterprising Sikh community. Kaniz, yes, that's right, the same book. And it's a very well documented book. It's also, it'll give you a feel of a travelogue, as Ambassador Puri mentioned, that he didn't go to Google and the internet and all that to search for the answers and search for that. He has personally visited those shrines. There are photographs of his where he has discovered the shrine, some really unforgetting shrines which have been totally forgotten in the annals of history. Very rightly said, and before that, what Rima ma'am was saying, that we must realize and put in books the oral traditions. And that's what Ambassador Puri has done. Precisely that's what he has done. As a historian, and he has, sir, you also already mentioned that being a bureaucrat, the government gave you this task of your interest. So you are doubly blessed, sir, as Shakespeare says, you're twice blessed. So, sir, my next question to you is related to what you have just mentioned. You know, the Sikh diaspora, we find it globally and everywhere. The enterprising Sikhs, what we say, and about the role of Gurudwaras. Wherever there is a crisis in the world, whatever may be, the Gurudwaras, they open their door irrespective, the eclecticism which they follow in their langars. Sir, I would like to know what is the role of the scriptures, what is the role of the religion which makes this community so dashing, so dynamic, adapting to every possible aspect of, the modernization, and so readily being accepted by the society at large.
Vertul, I think you started it off very well by asking and using a word called diaspora. You know, when we look at Indians overseas, I think most people would certainly include the Sikhs among those who are part of the dispersal of Indians worldwide. There are Tamils, there are Gujaratis, and in our generation, Keralites. This is the sum total, isn't it? In the big, broad manner, of course, from all communities, there are people there. Sikhs are all over the world, but nobody thought there would be Sikhs in Nepal. But I was happy, very, very happy and thrilled that there are. So there are these lost and so on communities. Now you asked me this very interesting question about what makes them what they are. Look, as I said, there are many, many people who are not just from the part of India, Punjab and Delhi and that area, but those who are converts in their own areas. So they bring their own ethnicity. But the question that you asked relates basically to those with the kind of ethnicity which flows from the Punjab. Now, Vertul, this is a religion where the originator, Guru Nanak, is 1569, the same time as the advent of the Mughal rule in India. So we're not old, we're just 500 years old. Very young by standards of religions anywhere in the world.
1499 was his
1469.
birth. 1499, he expired in 1539.
That's right. So
40 years of age.
550 years
Yes,
is
sir.
what we
Yes,
do.
sir.
Now, the fact of the matter is that this is a land which has seen a great deal of, let me say, traversity through its history. All the invasions from Central Asia, we can keep going back to God knows what times. There was someone in one of the other rooms talking to us about what the Mahabharata did. Many ideas, etc. are there. The latest archaeological finds talk about it. That's not for me to do. But ethnographically and in terms of what their experience is, a degree of hardiness is a kind of ingrained in the DNA, and also adaptability in today's world. We would use the word innovativeness. People have migrated. You know how the first migrations of Sikhs in modern times happened. Of course, Guru Nanak traveled, went to Mecca, Medina, went to Tibet, etc. But his was a sole individual cause. But how did most of the migrations happen? They happened on the backs of the British Empire. And I mentioned to you, both the Gurkhas and the Sikhs became the bulwark of the British Empire, forming nearly 20% of the Indian army, which was really the controlling force. People like me, all of us come from the civil services, we call it the steel frame. I mean, it was the steel frame because the army stood behind it. And that's the nature of the game. The Gurkhas didn't really go around. They went with the British army where it took them, but the Sikhs were enterprising. And they leveraged two very specific aspects of the British Empire worldwide. One was this soldiery, policing, etc. And the other thing that they leveraged was their skills in carpentry. Because railroads were laid by the Brits in India, in China, in Africa, and across the American continent. These chaps leveraged their carpentry skills. You know, railway lines in the old days used to have what we call the sleeper. And they leveraged those skills, perhaps available cheaply. And that's how the migration happened. At the end of the 19th century, the first Sikhs landed up in Canada. A result of something unbelievable, Vertul. It's a beautiful story. Queen Victoria celebrated her 75th anniversary. Our empire, elements of the British Raj were sent. Obviously, contingents of the Indian army were sent. And now comes something beautiful. You know, the oldest department in the Indian army, other than the fighting forces, is what is today called the Defense Accounts Department. It's called DAD. Earlier, it used to be called the Military Accounts Department, MAD. So they always functioned on accounting. And some accountant figured out that it's all right, we've got these troops in London, and after it's over, to send them back, it's cheaper to ship them across to Canada. They railroad across Canada, and from there it was cheaper than the fare coming via the Cape of Good Hope, and that's how some guys landed up in Canada, Vancouver, Seattle, etc. You know, these accountants, they're damn good.
Right, sir. And just taking your word from here, we have General Naidu here. He has written, again, a wonderful book. I'll be having another session with him. But he has mentioned something very interesting, which you just said, although in a passing manner, about Sikhs who were chosen for policing and in the army. You know what, in Bhopal Army, Bhopal State Army, General Naidu has mentioned about the Sikhs who have settled in Madhya Pradesh, and during my conversation with you, you also said about something about the Sikh diaspora in Madhya Pradesh. So, sir, that is extremely creditable for the community. I will give another example of people who go abroad. During my UN tenure in Kosovo, sir, we had a lot of Sikh officers with us. And you'll be surprised, most of them, rather all of them together decided that why don't they purchase land here and start farming of all the people. And they said कि भाई आप देख रहे हो कितने खाली ये बंजर जमीनें पड़ी हुई हैं, इनसे तो इतना बढ़िया गेहूं निकल सकता है. So you know that conversation, and I realized कि well, that is something which is very wonderful about it, this particular community. Again, sir, my next question is, it won't be last, but don't you think that coming back to Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the Bhakti movement, which started which spanned for almost around 400 years, we had Sant Tukaram in Maharashtra, Namdev and Tukaram in Maharashtra, we had Chaitanya Prabhu in Bengal, we had Alvars and the Nayanars in South India, Kabir, of course, okay, let's say the edifice of Sikhism is based on Kabir's Bhakti movement also, Kabir's Dohas and all that, which Guru Nanak Sahib has quoted liberally in the Guru Granth Sahib. What are your views on the Bhakti movement being incorporated in Sikhism? And with a liberal input of Sufism, let me add on that.
So, Vertul, you know, these are very fundamental questions. Most of the studies on all of this were done by British historians, and Cunningham is the name that comes to mind, who in his thesis said that all of this is part of the Bhakti movement, which was a kind of synthesis of Islam in Hindu thinking, and he places Guru Nanak in that. But I'm afraid, and you know, I can't compare myself with Cunningham or with MacLeod or anyone, but as a practitioner, it is my belief that that is not the fact. That was the milieu. After all, Guru Nanak was born in a country where there were only two possibilities. You were Hindu or you were Islam in various forms, various things. There was a small amount of exposure in him in his life to Judaism, a degree of Christianity in his travels to Mecca. But it couldn't have been more than that, at least not in his milieu. What would he see in terms of reading, writing, climbing trees, eating food? Would he be having pastas? It's not possible. So you tend to work within that. But is there originalism? In my opinion, there is nothing else but originalism. That the originalism has to be rooted in your environment. Cannot but be that. Now, if you read that as being the environment being the cause of it, it's an interpretation. In my opinion, no. Because it is not just a bringing together of Hinduism and Islam. After all, we are followers of the book, which is very much like the same thing. Now you can say, is this taking from Islam? I don't know. I won't say so. There is originalism. It is a religion where the fundamentals are krit karo, mean do good deeds, naam japo, take the name of the Lord, which means really be spiritual, and one chako, which means share. These, in some senses you can say every religion has it, but they are not the tenets of most religions. And therefore, I firmly believe that there is an originalism. And it is this originalism which obviously in a country like India gets heightened, subsumed, as well as subtracted from constant. It happens to all of us, it happens to our society. We can call it admixture, we can call it whatever else. But this is at least my personal belief. Now, I'm as good as the next guy around, a PhD, has some credentials which are more, but I think this particular recognition of an independent religion, which today is a thought that many people have, and people talk about it, at least as far as I'm concerned personally, there is no doubt about it.
So this is my second last question. I generally mention this because it prepares the speaker to frame his answers. Sir, I am a subscriber to academia. This is an intellectual think tank which publishes in PDF forms all the studies done on specific issues of interest globally. One of the articles I went through, and it was just a coincidence when I was given this topic, I was preparing and thinking how to frame my questions. It just appeared in my email about Sindhi Sikhs. And sir, what you mentioned, that independent religion, it has been written by a Sindhi Sikh, and she has lamented the fact that unfortunately neither in partition documents nor in the Sindhi refugees who came from Pakistan to India is there any mention of Sindhi Sikhs, and they are vastly now being presumed and now subsumed within the larger community of the Sindhis at large, wherever they are concentrated. So how do you react to that, and what are your how does Sikh religion in particular think about on those lines?
Vertul, this is a very interesting but complicated question. So something which needs to be understood is like this. Guru Nanak, when he passed away, he did not make his sons the next guru. In fact, the first three gurus did not pass on the Guru Gaddi to their children. Now, therein lies a certain history. I told you Guru Nanak, in my understanding, is the originator. As the religion progressed over the 10 gurus, and finally in the form of Guru Gobind Singh, who laid down that after me no more gurus, Guru Manyo Granth, the book will be the guru. Now, there are a number of things in this. So there are these entire issues, these things called the udasis. What happened was Guru Nanak's children, in a sense, refused to accept that they were not there. And there were people in the community who started following them. So we have a large number of communities in Punjab and outside in particular. Sindh is one of those examples. Yes, this is called the Udasi sects. So they are all over, and Sindhis are the best example. Sindhis claim that they are followers of Guru Nanak. They are not Sikhs.
It rings the bell somewhere with the Prophet Muhammad Sahab's this thing also. When we see the division between Shia and Sunni, exactly the same thing happened there too.
So, of course it happened a few generations later, the caliphate and how it got divided. Now, this particular thing in the case of Sikhism, followers of Guru Nanak but not Khalsa, there are various definitions which have continuously stemmed from that. And there is no doubt that the Sindhis worldwide have carried the Guru Granth Sahib and carried the name of Guru Nanak all over the place. Are they members of the Khalsa Panth? People will say, no, they are not. But they themselves don't say that they are. But are they followers of Guru Nanak? That's their belief. Most of us respect and recognize this particular fact. Now, what happened was, not only did this happen with Guru Nanak, as I told you, the next Guru also had happened. So there's a spawning, and because this is only 500 years old, this is something that you still see in existence. In the case of Islam, it happened, let me say, about 1,000 years earlier. So, there's a degree of subsuming in what happens in all of this. And this is naturally one of the conundrums that we certainly as a community face. My understanding of this is, believers, even if you don't recognize them to be inherent and integral, should be respected and revered. And for most of us who've lived overseas, let me tell you, we have endless number of Sikh friends. Their gurdwaras are the only ones in several places. Let me mention Hong Kong, etc. They were the guys who were able to afford things. There are Sindhi communities who have gone to every part of the world where there was a free trade zone. So you will find them in Tierra del Fuego at the bottom of Chile. The whole of Panama and the entire Caribbean is sponsored by them, or in a sense they are there in large numbers. They uphold the Guru Granth Sahib. Matter of great pride, reverence. Are they part of the community? Well, in a sense, an adjunct part.
So my last question. I'm asking this question to provoke you a bit. Sir, when we talk of Sikhism and we talk of scripture and the book, now I want to know what exactly is the role of religion in this 21st century, which has been wonderfully articulated by Yuval Hariri in his book, 21 Questions, Problems and Questions for 21st Century. I'm forgetting the name of exactly. I read it long back. In that he has articulated that he's asked the same question. What is the role of the religion in this era of artificial intelligence, biodiversity, global warming? What does the role of scriptures have now? It was relevant in the Middle Ages, in the 15th, 16th century. Rather, it was necessary also to some extent because the gullibility of the hoi polloi, the masses. You required something very authoritative, the backing of a church or backing of the temple. Your views on that, Ambassador Puri?
Vertul, the old saying used to be, it's the opium of the masses. But is it really so? Have you seen the bourgeois and their reactions? Aren't they the ones who both use it as well as subscribe to it? Don't we all look at the way, not just in India, let me leave India out because then we become emotional. Let's take the Western world. While people going to churches may be declining, tell me how many people opt not to be part of the church. I'll give you a lovely example. Germany is a fantastic country where there is a law that a small portion of the income tax that you pay will be sent to the church as what is called church tax. So, you pay 100 income tax, 1% of your income tax, the state by law gives to the church. Still, it's the law. And this is divided between the two big churches, the Catholic and the Protestant church. However, anybody who says that he's agnostic and is not a Christian can opt out and his money will not be divided. Hardly anybody does it. Nobody goes to the churches, but hardly anyone does it. Isn't that the nature of the way we are? And so therefore, while there is a diminishing in certain phase, in certain ways it continues to remain where it is. It has a kind of unifying forces for all of us. We all look at it, and in simple matters of our daily life, don't we invoke God? And for all of us, the manifestation is religion to which we were born, essentially. There are some converts, but most of us continue to espouse that particular thing. I do it. I don't think I'm particularly, let me say, religious in various senses of the term, but it's something which is there deep down, and I keep invoking it because maybe that's the way I am used to it, and I have a sense of happiness for a few seconds, and isn't that important by itself?
Certainly. And just a footnote to this. In fact, like religion, I think I'm affirming what you just now said. I believe in that the great classics also are the same, play the same role because it somehow appeals to the larger consciousness of the people at large. And thank you, Ambassador Puri. We were really enlightened by your. We are in fact very lucky to hear some of the anecdotes which you have just mentioned, enlightened. And once again, thank you very much, Ambassador Puri.
Thank you, Vertul. Thank you. And I'm very happy to carry your lovely book with me.
Thank you so
Thank you
much,
so much.
gentlemen. It was absolute pleasure listening to both of you. And now I open the stage for questions to the audience. Yes, please.
Sir, thank you. Happy to see you here. I'm lucky I have my two tenure in Halwara and Ludhiana. I was posted to Halwara and Chandigarh. 10 years I spent in Punjab sector. Not required. Thank you. So I still cherish the tasty food of Gurudwara and whatever good time I had in Punjab. I did my graduation from there, Chandigarh University. And now my question to you that many type of Mirabai, Sant Kabir, Bhajan, many of the religion, and whatever you told just now, I do believe is correct. But many of the things has come from the Hindu scriptures or Islamic things. What do you say? That's my second question. Germany, I have seen a lot of unification with Hindu and Sikh and Punjabi. They are celebrating Baisakhi. So I don't think there is much difference between the nationality and celebrating. Punjabis are same. I find in the shop they are working together and they are happy atmosphere. So whatever the difference we find here, that is not existing there.
He had answered that actually if you had heard him.
Vertul, let me just say something. Dekho ji, people are the same, right? We celebrate Baisakhi, we eat makki ki roti and saag, we all enjoy it. Do you know the guys sitting across in Pakistan are also enjoying the same stuff? All right. So there are issues dealing with your religion, there are issues dealing with your ethnicity, your geography. And you are absolutely right. You know, people must interact and live with each other. I've come to your city for the first time, and I think I see lovely cohabitation, isn't it? That's the nature of the game. And I'm so glad that that's the way people are structured, isn't it? But I want to take advantage of your question and say something to you about what you said, this Gurudwara, Langar, etc. You know, Nepal, on the 550th birthday of Guru Nanak, issued legal tender. 3 coins were issued in 2,500 and 1,000 rupee, Nepalese rupees, and 100 rupees Nepalese. The 100 was cupro nickel coin and the other 2 were silver coins. They are legal tender. Almost no country issues legal tender on some other country's ideas. The Nepalese did it. I will tell you the little story which possibly motivated people to do it. The governor of the central bank, when I asked him, would you consider doing this? After all, it's quite a big thing to do it. He stopped me short, held my hand and said, you know, I studied in India and I want to just tell you this. One of my best friends was a Sikh, but the beauty of what he did for me was he introduced me to this beautiful thing which is called Langar, which me as a relatively not well off Nepalese student trying to make his ends meet ensured that I had a community and a place where I not only got some food, nourishment, but I had a community which I could call myself through my entire BA and MA out here. Similarly, the Prime Minister of Nepal, KP Sharma Oli, Communist Prime Minister, told me, Bhaiya, when I was hiding in the jungles in India, escaping the monarchy, the king's forces, looking for me in India, for many weeks one was going with barely making ends meet. And then someone told me, this is in the Bihar area, कि भैया ऐसा है, अरे यार शाम को जाके लंगर में खाना तो खा लो. And he said, my pride came in the way. And I said, no, I won't go because I am not a member of that faith. And he said, I stuck it out for several weeks till necessity forced me to go. Once I went, I never stopped going because nobody made me feel that I was not an adherent to the Sikh faith, but I was not entitled to what was there as the common langar and sangat. That is the nature of it. That is true. That is right.
Second question, please.
Ambassador Puri, I would like to ask you if you ever studied the Sikhs who are living in the south of India in Andhra Pradesh and in Assam. They wear turbans, they follow the Sikh religion, but they are ethnic Assamese and they are ethnic Andhra Pradeshis. That's the first question, part of your research. The second thing is about the divisions between these religions, these great religions. I was talking to somebody the other day, my mechanic basically. So he mentioned, I said, घोर कलयुग आ गया यार, अब तो बुरा हाल है. He said, हमारे यहाँ लिखा हुआ है कि जब तक 4000 ग्रुप्स नहीं बनेंगे, तब तक कयामत नहीं आएगी. और अभी हमारे ही आस में कि आपके यहाँ कितने ग्रुप्स हैं, मैंने कहा 5-6 हैं, शायद 7-8 हैं. तो any idea about that?
Sir, this gentleman, let me tell you, he is half Burmese and half Sikh, as he has mentioned yesterday only.
You know, look, there hasn't been tremendous amount of proselytization or conversion, but it has happened. You mentioned yourself, sir, I'm very proud. You go to one of the biggest and most important Sikh gurdwaras called Hazur Sahib. The people there are not Punjabi. They are Sikhs. In the United States today, many of you have heard of this Yogi Bhajan and his lot. They're winning Grammys and so on. Yeah. They are not Punjabis. So religion and ethnicity, because almost most of us come from there, then sir, we say what you said, that all Sikhs like makki ki roti and saag, but not necessarily. Some may like momos and like something else. That can happen. It's a religion. Almost much of it comes from one place, so that happens. Sir, I've heard about this Assam and elsewhere. I don't know much to be able to comment on it. But fundamentally speaking, we do have to accept that there is religion and there is ethnicity, and these are different things. So I know Myanmar, Burma, there was this community. We know all these facets. As I said, it's a community that has traveled, a religion which has traveled. Both are true.
So now we have just
question.
last question.
This is the last question.
Yeah.
And thereafter we proceed forward.
Good afternoon, sir. When I see people talking about Sikh history, most of the time when I meet some historians or some people who are studying history into colleges or completing their degrees, most of the time the Sikh history is popular from Guru Gobind Singh Ji till Sher-e Punjab Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji. Is it that from Guru Gobind Singh Ji to Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji, they have the leaders made Punjab such an immense popular thing, the war times, the seva, eventually Maharaja Ranjit Singh's giving gold to Darbar Sahib has made such an enormous impact on the world that these people are only remembered that what Punjab is today. Maharaja Ranjit Singh, that is whenever you say something for Punjab, they say, yeah, Maharaja Ranjit Singh was there. Maharaja Ranjit Singh was from Punjab. Is it that that a particular time has made Punjab such a great, powerful state that it has been today in the world?
You know, look, we all like heroes, don't we? We all like victories. The Sikhs are obviously very happy that there was a Sikh kingdom, that it stretched from Peshawar almost to Delhi. That's the nature of human society. No difference from any of that. We have only 500 years. So if you have some victories in 500 years, you feel very proud. You talk about it, others talk about it. Who's going to talk about defeats? No one does. We've had sacrifices. The Sikh religion in its 500 years, if it had Maharaja Ranjit Singh and victories, and Kohinoor and this, that, it had sacrifices. 2 Sikh gurus being martyred. All the children of the 10th guru being martyred. So there are sacrifices too. It's the nature of this society, whether it was ethnicity or the scripture or Guru Nanak's message that drove us. Each and every one of us makes our own assessment to all of that. But I think we stand very proud and tall, and today worldwide, absolutely worldwide. And we have every reason to it. Vertul started off by asking that in any times of any crisis, somehow or the other, the ubiquitous turban appears. In the days of COVID, refugees of recent times, this British aid charity, Khalsa Aid, all over the place. Look what was done in Delhi during the COVID times, langars, oxygen langars. We had never heard of this thing. But yes, that's the nature of the community. There is this concept, as I said, not only that you do good deeds, that you remember the Lord, but you do what is called van chako, which means that you distribute what you've got with everyone. That's a driving force.
Thank you so much, sir. And now proceeding to conclude, I would like to invite Meera Das ma'am to give the memento to our speaker, Mr. Manjeev Singh Puri, and the BLF mug to our discussant, Mr. Vertul Singh. Can we please have a round of applause for them? Thank you so much, gentlemen.